In this lecture, it's time to take a first look at the application that we're going to build in this section. We will also take a closer look at the starter files for this project, and we will also check out the flowchart for this application. So let's get started. And this is the application that we will build throughout this section and also the next one. So it's called Bankist. And this is here the demo version that is actually live on bankist.netlify.app. So I invite you to actually try out this application together with me as you watch this video, so to get a real good feeling for how it all works. Now this looks a little bit empty, and so you can just basically log in. So write JS, and then the pin is 1111. And so Bankist stands for Minimalist Banking. And so this is why we have this kind of banking, so an online bank interface. So we have all the movements here. We have the overall balance of the account up here. Then we have some summary data down here. And here on the right side, we have three options that we can do. So we can transfer money to someone else, we can request a loan from the bank, and we can close the account. So let's request a loan here. Let's say I need 1,000 euros. So I click here, and then after some time it is approved, and it appears here as a deposit. Okay, then I can also transfer money, and there is a user called GD, and let's say I want to transfer 5,000. So let's try that. And so now I have 5,000 less than I used to have. Finally, we can also sort these here. So now they are sorted, and now they are back to normal. And now let's go to that other account, JD, with the pin of 2222. And so let's check out if she has a deposit of 5,000. And indeed, here it is. We also see that this account here is in US dollars and with the American formatting, while the other one was in euros. And so that's something that we're going to take care of in the next section. But in this section, we will actually take care of displaying all of these movements, making these operations here possible, calculating the statistics, as well as the current balance. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm really, really happy with this application. I think it looks amazing. It also looks like a real world use case. And yeah, overall, this is a great project for training arrays because we can do lots of the stuff that you see here on the screen using arrays. Great. So now that you have a feeling for how this application works, let's take a look at a flowchart that I designed or that I built for this application. So here is that flowchart for the Bankist application. And just like before in the pick game, I built this one based on the flow of actions that we just saw in that live version of the Bankist application. So starting there in the top left, as the user logs in, which is one of these yellow actions, so all of these yellow elements here mean some sort of action. So when the login action is performed, we check for the correct credentials, and if they are correct, we display the UI, and then we also update the UI. And so that means to calculate the balance, calculate the summary, display the movements, and then later on in the next section, we will also start and display a logout timer. So all of this here happens right at the beginning as the user logs in. And so actually this part in the beginning here, everything that is inside the update UI will be the first thing that we will do. Okay, then from there we will implement the kind of fake login, and then we will take care of these other operations. So probably we will come back to this flowchart by then. But anyway, this is already a very good overview of all the steps that we have to implement in order to build this application. And you can spend some more time on this and actually compare it to the functionality of the application. That's why one more time I included this flowchart in the starter files of this section. Now this time, just like in the pig game, I built this flowchart myself because all that matters here in this project is to build this application and learn all about arrays. But in the next big project, we will actually plan the entire application together, and I will show you all the steps that we have to go through in order to come up with a flowchart like this. So don't worry about designing a flowchart just yet. We will learn how it works and how to plan an application from the ground up. But for now, again, my purpose with this flowchart is just to give us a good overview, so a good roadmap to actually go ahead and implement all the features of this application. And so then whenever we get lost, we can always just come back to this flowchart and see exactly how the application works and what we have left to implement. Okay, but with that being said, let's now go back to our code editor and take a closer look at all the starter files that we have there. So right at the top of our script, we have these 4 account objects. Okay, and so this one here was the JS that I just showed you in the demo. And so here then are the movements stored in that object. We also have the pin, and later on we will also use this interest rate. Okay, now of course in the real world you would want much more data about each of the movements, not just the value, right? For example, we would use the date of each movement, maybe a description, and so on. But here we really just want to work with arrays. And so I'm keeping it very simple, but still at the same time fun to build. Okay? So yeah, so one object for each account. And you could ask, why not use a map instead of an object? Well, the thing is that we're going to pretend that all this data is coming from a web API. So a little bit like we talked about earlier. And whenever we get data from an API, this data usually comes in the form of objects. And so this is why we have objects here. And then finally, an array containing all these account objects in there. Remember that this is one of the most common ways of organizing data in JavaScript applications. And so that's why we are going to use it throughout this section to make this actually feel a bit more like a real-world application. All right. So that's the data. Let's take a look here a little bit at the other files. So as always, we have the prettier configuration. Then here's the flowchart that I just showed you. And so here you can take a look at it by yourself. Then the index.html, and this one is a lot more complex now, and we will actually need it to take some code out of there. Then here we have the icon and the logo. So like this icon you see here in the tab, so the fav icon. And finally we have the style. And so here you can have some fun and learn some CSS if you're interested in it. So it's almost like 300 lines of code, I think, that I built to style this application. So you see, I really put a lot of work to make this application really fun. Okay. So I think that's it for the starter files. Just notice that I already selected all of the elements that we're gonna need. So you see, it's a lot of stuff, and I'm gonna explain what each of this is. But what matters is that this way, we don't have to write all of this code ourselves. And so this makes development a little bit faster. So a lot of elements here. And yeah, so I think that's it for this video. I think you got a good overview of this project for this section. And once again, please go ahead and take a look at this URL by yourself and use user.js and pin 1111. And then when you're familiar with how the application works, then let's move on.